Freshman year of undergrad, I remember attending the first football game of the season. Look, that's me right there, about 17 rows down, 37th to the left. Now, if you look closely, you'll see me dancing, right? Because the band had everybody on their feet, and it felt like one giant family reunion. I distinctly remember in that moment pausing and thinking to myself, just in pure wonderment, I've never seen this many Black people together in one space in my life.
I remember being a freshman at Auburn, walking around campus and feeling out of place. Between the massive brick buildings, the sea of students walking to class, and the big lecture classrooms, it was hard for me to find students that looked like me and talked like me. Coming from Birmingham, Alabama, which is over 60% Black, being the only Black person in my class did not sit right with my spirit. I needed to find the Black people. And that's when I saw the flyer, and in big bold letters it read, Black Student Union meetings Mondays at 5 p.m. in the Student Center. That next Monday, me and a couple of my girls walked into that room of Black students from all walks of life. The joy, the conversation, and the laughter that filled that room, it reminded me of home. It reminded me of freedom.
What we created in that space, it extended beyond the stadium, and it went into the classrooms where my professors felt more like my aunties and uncles. It was on the set every Friday where we shared in community with music, art, and food, in the quad where the eternal flame stood proudly, and in the lasting friendships that I created, friendships that have spanned over a decade. My time in undergrad felt like it was designed with me in mind, me specifically, like Tanisha. I felt seen and cared for. It was the first time in my life that I was in the majority, the first time where the identities, the histories, and the experiences of people who looked like me were centered in every conversation. I still feel that same sense of wonder when I think about that time in my life, and I know undoubtedly I would not be this version of myself without those experiences.
Spaces like Black Student Union saved me from slipping through the cracks and helped me to believe in myself, connected me to Black faculty and staff that treated me like I was their daughter, and reminded me of who I could be, and provided me with friends who were like family, that showed up at the funeral when my dad passed away without any questions asked, and have been at every single milestone since. The Black people at Auburn made my college experience. We created our own traditions, made sure we made it to graduation, and inspired each other to take up space, especially in places that told us we didn't belong. I felt unconditionally loved and protected. I left Auburn knowing who I was and knowing that being me was simply enough. I attended a PWI, a predominantly white institution. Yes, at times, it was isolating and lonely, but I found a space that created a sense of home and safety for me, connected me to my forever family, and protected my sense of self.
And I attended an HBCU, an historically Black college and university, a space created to be my cultural sanctuary, a space that connected me to my identity and my purpose, a space that protected my liberation.
These experiences and spaces transformed us, and are the reasons why we found ourselves in the counseling psychology doctoral program studying to be psychologists. It is also the reason why, when we got to the University of Georgia, we sought after spaces that reminded us of our college experiences. Luckily, we found that space on the Sankofa Research and Outreach team under the direction of Dr. Colette Chapman Hilliard. In the walls of her office, we can let down our armor and just be ourselves, talk about the microaggressions we just experienced in the hallway, and hold each other accountable. Because even though we do have all this Black girl magic, we need to save some for ourselves. This team is our sisterhood, our sacred space.
Sacred spaces are affirmative and protective, dedicated spaces with people who value and share your identities, your history, your language, and your experiences. They embrace you and give you the permission to be vulnerable, to feel tension-free, and to be authentic. Sacred spaces are on our college campuses, they're in our neighborhoods, they're at our work.
Now, you may be familiar with the term safe spaces. We want to be clear. Sacred spaces are not safe spaces. They are different. Safe spaces tells us that we should feel more comfortable in our identities in an often intolerant world. Here we are told that the safety and visibility of oppressed groups are promoted, and that controversy should be met with civility.
That's what we're told. But if you've ever been the only Black woman in a room and someone told you to calm down, or you found yourself feeling guarded, found yourself justifying your experiences, or whatever version of that you might have experienced within your own identities, then you know the reality is that sometimes these spaces don't feel so safe, and that for Black people specifically, safety can often feel like an illusion. That oftentimes we find ourselves in close proximity with neighbors who disguise themselves as allies, who do not value our experiences and who perpetuate violence against our communities. Because of this, it is absolutely necessary that we distinguish safe spaces from sacred spaces.
So let's talk about why sacred spaces even matter. And as we are doing this, you may find yourself feeling uncomfortable. It may be a little uneasy. Just know that all those feelings are part of the change process. Sacred spaces matter because all people deserve to feel connected and protected. But history tells us that Black people have been disconnected and unprotected time and time again. Black families were ripped away from their villages, forced on ships, and enslaved to come to a country that stripped them of their language, their religion, their culture, their humanity, and even life. This was known as the Ma'afa, the Black Holocaust.
It matters because after 400 years of cultural devastation, the terror against Black people continued. For instance, in 1919, a Black soldier by the name of William Little was traveling home to Georgia after surviving World War I. When he arrived, he was met by a white mob, and they wanted to strip him of his uniform, of his dignity. He refused, and they lynched him. And the Black community was left once again to grieve quietly in the shadows. William Little, like 4,743 others, was lynched, stripped of his liberty, his humanity, and his life, disconnected and unprotected.
A more contemporary example that many of you may be familiar with, the murder of George Floyd. The video of the murder of George Floyd has been viewed over 1.4 billion times and counting. 1.4 billion people watched a police officer kneel on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The heaviness, the brokenness, and the collective grief we as Black people experienced knowing we had to be around people that debated George Floyd's humanity, debated our humanity.
What William Little's and George Floyd's stories have in common is that they lay bare a reality that so many Black people face. The reality that merely existing in our skin can bring death on any day, at any moment, that we are unprotected.
Michael Dawson is a Black professor that developed this notion called linked fate, meaning that Black people knew that their destinies were tied to the destinies of other Black people. So when we see and we hear about the William Littles, Breonna Taylors, Tony McDades, and George Floyds, we know that it could be us, our fathers, our mothers, and our siblings.
What you're feeling right now and what it means to us, these are the reasons sacred spaces are so important. These are realities that we cannot escape, repetitive narratives that tell us time and time again we're not safe. Not safe to go to the store, not safe to go to school, not safe to go to church, not safe to live. And it doesn't go away when we close that app on our phone, or when we turn the TV off, or even when we go to sleep at night. We run out of spaces in our inner and outer worlds where we can just be, where we can heal.
So that begs the question, where is it okay for us to talk and process our experiences, our hurt? We need a place where healing can happen, a place where we can exhale, where we can finally breathe. Sacred spaces. In the summer of 2019, I created the Healing Circle along with Ecclesia Savage. This space was a support group for Black women that Tanisha and I now co-facilitate. We knew there was a need for Black women to have a sacred space that valued their healing, centered their lived experiences, and cultivated freedom.
I got a chance to not be okay, and it be okay.
The Healing Circle gave me the space to be vulnerable and eventually the push to seek individual counseling without feeling guilty for needing help.
I was quietly going through one of the most difficult times in my life. I got reassurance that I am not alone.
I made connections with women that understood the language of hurt I was speaking.
I needed a space where I could be myself and not worry about code switching or walking on eggshells to ensure I didn't fall into perceived stereotypes. These are the voices of the women who participated in the Healing Circle.
The mental health implications of experiencing violence and terrorism on an everyday basis is detrimental to our well-being. Sacred spaces help us combat those realities.
Sacred spaces for Black folks are freedom spaces, connected and open spaces, spaces for us and by us.
So what does creating sacred spaces even look like? For us, it was being intentional. We wanted Black women to know that this space was designed specifically for them to access the power that already lies within them and speak to the freedom that happens when Black people come together.
It was a space that honored the complexities of Black womanhood while also making space for intimacy, vulnerability, joy, and healing. It was centering Black values, principles, and traditions to promote healing and recognizing the systemic nature of racism in order to help each other navigate all the spaces we occupy outside of these sacred spaces.
These spaces can be created organically or even organized. These spaces are rare. You either have to seek them out or be invited in. They're the group chats, organizations, homecomings, family reunions, kickbacks, and the cookouts.
And because we benefited so much from the spaces that nurtured our healing, we knew we had a responsibility to pay it forward. And we know many of you have similar stories and a similar appreciation. You also have the agency, wherever you are, to create these spaces. Create that group chat, create that organization, create a space within your network that is sacred. Listen, regardless of your experiences or your identities, we all benefit from having a space where we feel valued and loved. What we're saying is this is particularly important for Black people because of the historical and present-day violence, because of the health disparities, because of the school-to-prison pipelines, because of the wealth gap, because of all of the things that have contributed to the 7 million Black people experiencing mental illness in the past year. 7 million. That's more than the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined.
And this is just not impacting the generation of adults. It's impacting the future generation of changemakers. As of 2018, suicide has become the second leading cause of death for Black children ages 10 through 14. Remember the 1.4 billion views? They were watching that, and they are watching us too.
They're wondering what their futures hold, and are we protecting them?
And as we are speaking, we know that you're thinking, as a social justice warrior, as an ally, as a human, where do I step in? Part of our fight to freedom and dismantling systemic oppression and racism is protecting sacred spaces so that Black people can rest and heal.
On our college campuses, it looks like hiring Black faculty and admitting Black students by the numbers, and supporting Black student-led organizations, students who didn't have someone to look to, much like we did with Dr. Chapman Hilliard. Like many other PWIs, the University of Georgia's Black student and faculty population is disproportionately low, with only 8.26% of all undergraduate, graduate, and professional students, and only 5% of faculty being Black.
This also means investing in our neighborhoods, like supporting Black businesses, schools, and ensuring that the people in these neighborhoods have what they need, rather than push us out through gentrification. This also means addressing racism and microaggressions within the classroom and in the workplace.
Holding folks accountable, ending police brutality, and challenging mandates, laws, and policies that continue to perpetuate violence and terrorism against Black bodies.
Your goal is to protect these spaces, like the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria, the neighborhoods, the barbershops, the HBCUs, Black student unions, the Sankofas, and the healing circles.
Sacred spaces for Black women,
Black men, Black queer folks,
Black trans folks, Black non-binary folks,
Black disabled folks,
Black Latinx folks,
Black immigrant folks.
Imagine a world without any sacred spaces for them.
Isolating and lonely, disconnected and unprotected. Now, imagine a world where sacred spaces are created and protected, and that you help to make these spaces possible.
Sacred spaces create a sanctuary, connect us to our stories, and protect our freedom.
Create, connect, protect.
This is all of our jobs.
All of our responsibilities.
We must create, connect, and protect sacred spaces.
Thank you.